What's up? It's Dr. Taylor Krick, host of the Autoimmune Doc podcast. Even I'm kind of reminded as I started speaking today that I woke up today with a little bit of a lost voice, but I've been wanting to do this video for a long time, so I'm like pushing through it and doesn't not really bother me. But this video is about mold remediation. It's one of the most important topics, and one of my goals, honestly, for this video is to make it as short as possible, but I don't think it's going to be short. But I want to go through some of the resources that we, provide to our clients at Washington Wellness Center, because I have a treasure trove of mold remediation resources that I've, acquired throughout the years. And so we share those with people. But I see people that still say like, "Oh yeah, I didn't look at those," or "Oh yeah, we just started ripping up walls." And like I saw somebody recently who has a large family. They got good mold testing, gave them all the right advice, all the right things to do, and they were like, no, we're just not going to follow that. And every single person in their family flared, and they're moving out of their house now. And so mold remediation is really difficult, even if you do it right, but it's impossible if you don't. And that's also, I don't want to make it sound impossible. It's not that hard to take all the necessary action steps, but it takes a little bit of background education. So that's my goal for today. This is mostly a video, for my clients, that when we send you all these resources and I say, hey, look through them, please, and take this very seriously. But I think that one of the problems with making a mold remediation video is that every home is different. Every problem is different. Every budget is different. So there is no cookie cutter way. But as you continue following, some of the experts that are out there in the indoor environmental world and in the, kind of clean air world, whether it be mold testing, mold remediation, the HVAC industries, et cetera, everybody's kind of saying the same thing about the importance of breathing clean air and the importance of finding and detecting problems, and that we don't have to have, every single mold spore be out of your house. That's absolutely impossible. But what are some of the engineering controls? What are some of the humidity controls? What are some of the airflow controls? What are some of the cleaning things that you can do from a DIY perspective? So I'm going to go through some of these guides. I'm not going to read them word for word, on purpose and intentionally, because it would take a really long time. So, and we'll figure out some way, if you're just watching my YouTube channel, we could figure out some way to get you these guides if you want them. But all these are freely available on the internet. So they're things that I've downloaded, and I'll give credit to all the people that I've, used them from, because a lot of them are the most trusted resources, in my world and in other ones. So the last thing I'll say is, again, just in a healthcare setting, I see a ton of mold. I see people that have come to me knowing that they have mold. I see people whose lives are completely destroyed and they've already found out that they have mold. I see people who are having a myriad of symptoms and have no idea that they're environmentally exposed. But we think of it like a bucket. And if, 8 out of 10 people in my practice, we start them on, gut protocols, detox protocols, dietary strategies, whatever the case is, and they're like, hey, I feel better. So if the bucket is emptying faster than it's filling, it's going to go down. When the bucket is filling faster than it's emptying, you're going to have an increase of symptoms. And so an increase of sensitivities, whether they be food sensitivities or environmental sensitivities, an increase of, maybe neurological symptoms, an increase of histamine related symptoms. All these things have many causes and many things that need to be, looked at from a skilled practitioner, and sometimes, need proper diagnosis and treatment and whatever else. But we just see mold all the time. So I think it's important to talk about the top of the bucket. And I don't think I could do it too often, because still people are doing it, right? And we just want you to take it, seriously. So I'm looking at my notes here. Another thing I said is understand that it's important. Understand, that all these boxes need to be checked. Read through these documents if we send these to you, and make a plan. More than anything, it's not impossible, but make a plan. Prioritize some things, do some cleaning, do some, professional remediation when necessary. But a lot of these things can be done on their own. So I'll start reading through these guys. Now, also, the last thing, I've got a few things just sitting here. My office, we have a variety of these things that I'm not necessarily going to discuss today, but some of them will come up. But, foggers, air scrubbers, ionizers, ozone machines, air purifiers. The more you read about this, there's different, opinions about all these things, and people will write articles about why fogging is good or why fogging is bad. But they're all tools that are commonly used in the indoor restoration or remediation industry. So we've got some things that we sell or provide to people, like EC3 wipes. EC3 is a formulation. It's pretty famous in the mold world, but we use EC3 in a fogger. We use EC3. This is an EC3 mold neutralizing candle. So there's all kinds of stuff out there. EC3 being one of the more famous ones. This one I have not used yet because I just got it. It's a little bit newer in the mold world, in the indoor environmental world, but it's called Superstratum, and it is purported to neutralize mycotoxins or destroy mycotoxins. So it can be used in a fogger. That's what I'm going to do it for. But all those things are important. But you can go and fog your stuff. But if you got a lot of dust, if you've got improper humidity controls, if you need to actually do some remediation, you just, walk out your front door with your carpet, that's where the mistakes happen. And that's where people can get actually sicker from going and stirring things up. So with that being said, as an intro, let me just jump in. There's 7 documents that I'm going to share, and I'm going to go through them, really surface level, because again, if I just read them word for word, it's going to get long and really boring. So here's the first one, and I have these in a bit of particular order because I think this first one is just the most general. It's great. So I'm going to go through it, but in 14 pages, it touches on a little bit of everything. It's written by Dr. Jill Carnahan, who is a pretty famous functional medicine personality. She's also really interesting to me because she grew up about 10 miles away from my practice. She now lives in Colorado and has a famous functional medicine practice out there. She's a great speaker, really knowledgeable. I mean, just super sharp person, but had cancer and had mold toxicity. So she talks about both of those things quite a bit, but this is just a complete guide. And again, just for the sake of time, I'm just going to skim through it. But this one's good because it adds a little bit of everything. So if you're just kind of at a starting point, it's like, well, what to do if mold is making you sick? Here are some of the top symptoms you might have. Do you have 5 or more of these? You might be exposed. So sometimes it's just the awareness. Talks about the low mold diet. So she says, suspect mold exposure. Here are your first steps, including testing. Check your home and office. Do some tests like ERMI tests. There's a lot of tests available. That's not really what this video is about, but it can be just really hard to even test for. So she touches on that. And again, this is an overview, 14-page free download that she makes, but hard to find. There's a million different things you can do. There's dust tests, there's ERMI tests, like she talks about. There's EMA tests, there's mold testing, people that you can hire, 90% of which are not great. So the more you dig into the mold world, that's what everybody says. Every practitioner, everybody. I actually talked to a friend of mine who's in California yesterday. We did like a 2-hour long podcast interview, and he said, you're gonna find this shocking, but between LA County and San Diego County, there's one person that I trust. And so like it's just most things out there are kind of crap, but keep looking, do all the different tests. There are physical exams, there are labs, etc. Get tested. Here's all the different labs. She gives, links to all those that are available. So, she kind of touches on a little bit of everything, which is great. She talks about clean up your air. I recommend Austin air purifiers. That's exactly what we use. That's exactly what I have in my office. That's exactly what I have in my kids' rooms and at my house and what my mom has and all these things. But there's a lot of brands out there. Air Doctors are famous and, blah, blah, blah. Get on a low mold diet. Use binders, detox techniques. So again, big picture, like what do you do? I'm more going to go into remediation and cleanup and like what can you do in the home is more my point of this. But talking about all these things, which I agree with. Neti Pot, I do all the time. Help me with mold. All these supplements, we have them all in our store. They help all the time, but it's just very customized. So again, I'm skimming because it kind of depends on what do you need. But then she goes into mold cleanup step by step. So moisture, holes in the gaps in the walls. Again, I'm going to dive into these a lot more in the next downloads. Condensation, air conditioning units, humidity, all these things are very, very common for mold. HVAC coils, duct work, carpet for sure. Holes and gaps in the walls, absolutely. That's harder to find. Humidity, the humidity is the number one thing that can allow mold to grow. So removing mold from your carpet, I'm going to go through some better things. HEPA vacuum is another one that I own that we have here, at the store. We've got all these things and we rent them out to people too. But partially I have them because of my own house and I want to keep my own environment clean. And then we also do, rent those out to people so that they can, take some of these action steps on their own without having to buy, a $700 vacuum or a air scrubber or things like that. So again, good advice, how to clean your carpet. I'm going to show you some things about how to remove carpet, removing mold from your clothes and soft furnishings. Again, I'm going to go into that deeper. But this is a good download, mold in your prized possessions. It's good because it touches on a little bit of everything and it touches a little bit on them, but it's great. And I love Dr. Jill, and she's somebody that everybody should follow. But she keeps going into some of these things. So again, just pointing it out that this is really, really good. Avoid cross contamination, things of that nature, which you'll see repeated a number of times on these downloads. The next one is honestly probably the most confusing of the ones that I share with people because I don't know, it's written for mold remediators, I think. But it's also just like, how do you remove small microbial particles? It's 12 pages long. So again, I'm not going to read through it word for word, but if you are trying to solve a mold problem, I would suggest that you take 20 minutes and read this 12-page document. And then I would suggest you take another 20 minutes and read the next document, and then another 20 minutes and read the next document. And now you're only an hour in, and you've got a little bit better idea of this. And I would do that, for 5 days straight, and then make a plan instead of just calling the first person or jumping right into it with your hammer and your nail and your sandpaper or something like that. Those stories make my skin crawl. Or I saw somebody else recently that they had a known mold exposure. She's like, I don't want to test for mold because we can see it. And she's like, our new floor is coming in 4 months. So we're not doing anything about our subfloor for 4 months. Those stories make me want to, jump out of a window. She's got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. It's like, oh my gosh. Like not only is she starting to experience symptoms, this mom that I talked to on the phone, but like her kids, like that scares the life out of me and other mold practitioners. Anybody that's in this world would be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that to me. But this goes through, mold remediation plan, again, the background, blah, blah, blah. So it's got just good advice. All surfaces should be cleaned using HEPA vacuums and physical dust removing. HVAC and air ducts must be cleaned. All porous surfaces must be sealed. Particles lingering in the air must be removed. So sometimes you need to HEPA vac the walls. You need to wipe off the walls. You need to run an air scrubber for a day or two afterward. That's what a lot of professional level remediation crews are going to do. So kind of mimicking that or thinking through, the good versus the bad and learning again from some of these experts. Depending on the client's wishes, each room may be approached separately. But ultimately, you got to get through the whole house. So that's kind of what they're saying there. You should work together to know what your goals are. The plan should be, put in place of like, these are the expectations. The remediation plan is a really important thing. And some of the professional, people that are out there that I'm going to talk about here in a moment, that's one of the things that they do as part of their professional services is like, hey, the remediator and the tester should be two different people. And the plan and contract should outline things. Now, remediators don't like that at all because I've seen instances where remediators had to come back like 3 times because it's written into their contract, like you're going to get rid of this mold. And if the testing, post-testing, doesn't show that the mold is gone after time 1, it's like, guess what? You got to come back time 2. They don't like that. And guess what? If they got to come back time 3, they really don't like that because they want to be like, move on to the next job, cash the next check. And I'm not saying that they're not doing it, in unethical ways by any means. They're probably doing as good a job as they think they can. But that's why testing can keep people honest. So this thing talks about, before beginning remediation, working with the client, blah, 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 mycotoxins, um, which are, microscopic and small and, are more airborne than mold spores. Mold spores don't travel very far. Mycotoxins can, and some of these other fungal fragments or endotoxins or things like that. They're all, different sizes. In some cases, clients may choose for financial reasons to perform certain tasks themselves. I mean, I encourage that, but what can you do and what timeline? Sometimes you just need to bite the bullet and get professional remediation because it might be done by next week instead of like, well, next month we're going to do the basement. The month after that, we're going to do the bathroom. Like, get out of it as quickly as possible. But the point is that there's a million different ways of doing it, and that's what this is, saying. And you should document your work. You should contain. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but containment should be made as small as possible. Negative air machines should be HEPA filtered and exhaust to the outdoors. Um, Plastic sheeting, I'm going to talk about that in more detail. But these are things that you're going to find over and over and over again in remediation advice, whether it be professional regulations or it be just a high quality remediator saying these are the standards that we, follow to make sure that this is done right. Because if it's not done right, you're going to be sicker. A tacky mat should be placed at the entrance, things like that. PPE goes into all these things, shoe covers, hazmat suits, masks, things like that, all important. Waste disposal. Some of these things are super important. Um, Dumpsters should be wet on a regular basis to control dust. Some of those things are really important, and even like carpet, which I'm about to read, spraying your carpet before you remove it can help dampen particles, but you don't want to spray too much because you don't want the subflooring to be wet and etc. So you should remove contents, decorative items, important documents, books, scrapbooks, things like that. Heirlooms are a problem for real. People want to hang on to their stuff. And I see people all the time that have moved out. And they're like, when I open a box of my old stuff, I can feel it. I hear that all the time. Or I just had somebody this morning, she's in Norway, and she said, I was in a library recently and I could feel it. And she said, I asked the librarian, do you have any leaks? And he said, oh yeah, we have a lot of leaks, but you might be feeling the mold on the old books. And I was like, that's a good librarian. So moisture issues, etc. Demo. Again, I'm not going to read through it all, but this is all like really, really good, disinfection, HEPA vacuuming, deep cleaning, wet scrubbing, air blasting to move dust and mobilize dust, cleaning paper materials. It's extremely difficult, as I just said. HVAC cleaning, to me, that should be done last after, you've done demo or reno or there's dust or things like that. But I'm not a professional. That is my logical thoughts. Sealing and painting surfaces, etc. Rebuilding, final cleaning afterward. Air fog, air cleaning. Stop all air scrubbers, negative air pressures before cleaning. Use, they're selling this aerosolver, I think, solution. I've never used that, but they're saying fogging, etc. Wet cleaning. I don't know. It goes on. I'm on page 10. I'm not going to read it all word for word, but feel free to look through it and put a plan in place. Here's the next one. This one's also really, really good. This is from a foundation called the Change the Air Foundation, which I'm a big supporter of. Big, voices in the fight, for indoor air quality, I would say. Because it's a weird thing, there's not a lot of lobbyists, so there's not a lot of like, pull in this with regards to, legislation and things like that. So I think it's an important thing that people need to be educated on. I also hear, which is scary, I've heard from a lot of people in the construction industry, in the HVAC industry, and they're like, oh yeah, this is talked about at our seminars, that there's going to be a wave of more like basically sick people because of, airtight, new building regulations and kind of the green energy efficient movement and things like that. that there's more issues, and the builders are aware of it. But this is a great document. This one, again, 20 pages, like every single page of this one is really, 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 really valuable. So, and this is probably the most important document out of them all as far as for mold remediation, because again, it touches on a little bit of everything. It says step 1, step 2, 3, step 4, and step 5, reevaluate how you're doing. And all these things are great. I could hit on every single one of these. It says mold remediation is about a removal, not about covering, not about spraying, not about fogging, not about encapsulating. That does not work. So if you've encapsulated your mold, if you've painted over it with some kind of, anti-mold paint or whatever, that is not proper remediation, according to everybody that I've ever heard. But yet still it's like wildly commonly accepted. So I just don't know where people are consuming their information. Both mold growth and any byproducts need to be safely removed. So that's mycotoxins, that's endotoxins, that's fungal fragments, et cetera, VOCs. The moisture source must be corrected. I mean, for sure, or the problem can return. So anyway, it's all really good. And it goes into, even some just conceptual things, like mold is like a factory. You want to remove the smoke from the factory, but you got to remove the factory. Um, Good remediation involves safely removing the mold growth and all the byproducts, the spores, the fungal fragments, the mycotoxins. So shut down the factory and clean up the crap that's been made by the factory. Sadly, most remediation only focuses on mold growth, like active mold, or they're like, oh, there's some mold, but it's not active mold. It's like, well, that matters still. And in a population of sick people, we see it all the time that will keep somebody sick. So you don't want to ignore cross contamination. You don't want to ignore these non-living things like mycotoxins. Mercury and things in air pollution and stuff aren't living, but they're toxic. I mean, that's kind of the point. So I think that these things, again, all matter. So, and it says this is the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration. There's 3 mold conditions. One is like normal fungal ecology. 2 is settled, meaning these are like spores that might come in on your shoes, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily have a mold growth in your home. 2 is settled spores or fungal fragments. And 3 is actual mold growth. But yeah. So step 2 is, the PPE, the engineering controls, demolition and removal, and detailed cleaning. So that's most of this with remediation is like this step 2. But the PPE, again, we already touched on it in the last guide. But these suits are like $12 on Amazon. Why would you not get one? And do you want, mycotoxins on your clothes and stuff like that? I don't understand again where people's logic comes from. Why would you not do this? Um, do you buy the $200 mask? I don't know. Do you buy a $30 mask? That's what I have. But it kind of depends on the problem you're trying to solve and what you're trying to do. But even if I'm going in and cleaning up my basement, if I'm going and cleaning up, fogging, air scrubbing, doing some of these things we're about to talk about, I'll wear a mask. I'll wear a mask sometimes if I'm dusting out my garage. I don't like wearing it when I mow the yard because I look stupid. But I don't know. I have no reason not to. But anyway. Keeps going about things like negative pressure, HEPA filtration devices. A lot of air purifiers are HEPA, a lot of air scrubbers are HEPA. Those things aren't hard to find. But it goes into all these things using 6 millimeter plastic, 6 millimeter plastic. So it says see the diagram on page 6. But there's all kinds of examples on here. Kendra Seymour did an amazing job of putting this together. You need air filtration devices. You need negative air pressure. Negative air pressure can be set up sometimes with a box fan in a window. Now, I'm not saying that's good remediation advice, but if you are at home cleaning up your house, what that means is that you don't want air blowing in to your house and spreading those things. You want the air blowing out. So that's negative air pressure. So a lot of times an air scrubber will be set up to have negative air going out the window. Here she kind of contrasts the two. An air scrubber can be converted to a negative air machine by just running it out the window like this picture shows. So I don't know. She keeps going, so I'm not going to read every word of it. And then then you demolition and you remove. So you've got to remove. Let's say there's mold on a floor joist. Well, again, you can't just paint over it. You can't just bleach over it. You've got to physically sand that off or wire scrub that off. That is 100% part of what's contractually obligated, but it's so often skipped over. It's unbelievable. Um, Abrasive measures are critical to removing all parts of mold growth, including the roots that may have grown into a material. Sanding, wire brushing, blasting, harsh chemicals are almost never needed. But all this stuff can be done even on your own, sanding, wire brushing, etc. There's sanding attachments that can hook onto a HEPA vacuum, like the HEPA vacuum that I have. There's sanding attachments that can hook onto it so the stuff doesn't go all the way into the air and et cetera. So, but you got to remove that stuff. It's drywall, if it's carpet, you got to remove 2 feet up, et cetera. All these things, um, yeah, this is good info. But again, without reading it word for word, and they also give, more advice, like Michael Pinto's fungal contamination. Here's some of the types of material, the visible growth, but mold must be removed. Spraying, fogging, killing, encapsulating, and painting over mold in place is insufficient. I don't think I could say that enough. I've already said it more than once, but people still do it, which is wild. Um, so then the detailed cleaning. This is sometimes the hard part. The HEPA vacuum, the damp wiping, hitting every single surface. Cross-contamination is really, really important. And all the surfaces are clean. Ceiling, walls, floors, windowsills, etc. Mold is microscopic. So again, I'm on page 10, and this is a long one. And then you need post-remediation verification. So you want to confirm that it's cleaned up. It says contract tip, agreeing ahead of time what constitutes a pass or fail. It doesn't need to be zero scores, but there needs to be a level of like, hey, you passed, good job. Or you didn't pass, you got to keep working on this. So anyway, this is really, 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 really great. So I'm just scrolling through just to show you that there's still more. There's still a lot more after remediation. So this is a really good document. Chemicals and remediation, frequently asked questions, etc. But again, for the sake of time, I'm going to keep going. What about fogging? A case against bleach? Nobody, I mean this literally, nobody recommends using bleach in the mold world. Really. So to me, that's just like, I don't understand why people still do use it. But in the professional mold remediation world, everybody, like their number one recommendation is like, don't bleach it. So to me, that doesn't need to be repeated. But the purpose of fogging, surfactants, a dish soap has surfactants in it, so removing grease, things like that, breaking things down. No spray and pray, with just fogging and then like, I hope I got it. Do not paint or encapsulate over mold. Should I say that again? Don't fall for these mold myths. Myth number one, mold that is dry or dead is no longer a health hazard. Just quite frankly not true. I mean, we see it all the time with people with autoimmune conditions, people with sensitivity issues, and you know, the question is, like, why are you still sick? If you don't believe this is a problem, why are you still sick? We see it all the time. Myth number two, mold behind a wall, under a floor, in an attic, somewhere that you don't spend a lot of time. I saw somebody the other day who's got a lot of symptoms, a lot of autoimmune conditions, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, my husband and I have separate bathrooms. I went into his bathroom looking for a Christmas present, and it is black under there." I'm like, she's like, "But I don't spend any time in there." I'm like, "But you're sick." So it absolutely matters. We see it all the time. So again, I don't need to beat that dead horse. Myth number three, only black mold is dangerous. Do people still say these things? It's wild. Myth number four, the mold remediation company is the professional. They know what they're doing. Oh, we had this professionally remediated. Well, why are you still sick? Half the people I see have had their house professionally remediated. They're still sick. They find mold. They find mold. Now, not everybody. Again, I'm speaking a little bit out of turn now with some hyperbole, but I see that all the time. homes that have been professionally remediated, homes that have had testing, had remediation, and it's like, oh, now we found the source of the problem after years. Myth number four, I already said that one, I guess. So anyway, it's not about being pro remediation. It's not about being anti remediation. I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. And here are some other free downloads that they link to from Change the Air Foundation. I could have done a whole video on all of these things, but look at the names of these things, you know, where to look for mold, questions to ask when hiring an indoor environmental professional, questions asked when hiring a remediation company, contracts, how to test your home. These things are the next two people that I'm going to talk about, the Change the Air Foundation, and then also, you know, We Inspect, which is a mold testing company. They're just great resources. They've got great podcasts. They've got great downloads. They're trying to give this information out there because people need it. And a lot of people are just doing it wrong. So anyway, this is really, really great document. So check it out. Terms to know. I mean, she went into a lot of detail here. The next one is a lot more basic, but I think that in the quest of knowing how to not do it wrong, this is a really important document. It's quick, even though it's 8 pages. I'm sometimes surprised that it's 8 pages because, you know, we get through it pretty quick, but it's important to know how people do it wrong. So some of these mistakes, here's the 2 reasons remediation doesn't work. Either you didn't find the source or you didn't do it right. You stirred things up and like things got worse. I've seen so many people that were like, it all started when I was renovating my bathroom. It all started when I was, you know, tearing down my basement to build a bar. It all started, sometimes it's not like it all started when my dishwasher broke and water was flowing through the ceiling. Those are obvious sources. But yeah, here's the mistakes. I'm going to read through a couple of them. One, improper engineering controls that create cross-contamination. If you are just stirring things up, things are going to be cross-contaminated and people are going to stay sick. So you need this 6 milliliter plastic, you need for negative air pressure. Again, remediators do have professional standards that they are supposed to follow. So this is, you know, not my scope as far as what's legally required, but from a good idea standpoint, these things are like for sure necessary. Number 2, not removing all contents and carpeting prior to cleaning or carpeting. It will, you know, holds mold and water. Number 3, not drying wet building materials. Number 4, not removing building materials high enough up. Number 5, not vacuuming well enough before treatment. Not removing mold growth from surfaces. This may be the biggest mistake that we see. Simply removing drywall and or spraying exposed framing is wrong. Your remediator is contracted to remove mold growth. This means that they need to abrasively remove mold that has grown into building materials by sanding or wire brushing. If they don't, they didn't actually remediate anything. And there will be plenty of mold left behind. You know, remediation companies that do proper remediation, it's really easy for them to pick on the companies that don't, because they're usually coming in to like clean up the pieces of like what didn't happen or why the person is still sick. So yeah, I think this is a serious one that again, I'm hitting again. Not using enough rags. I always find that one interesting. Each rag should be used to address a small area, then it should be discarded and you know, taken to wash and reuse again, maybe at the next project, but I don't think they throw them away. But encapsulating over wet building materials, this will create new mold growth. Encapsulating over debris, first, there shouldn't be any debris. See mistake number 5, but you shouldn't encapsulate over debris and not cleaning the entire containment area, so the walls and things like that. So, you know, they keep going into some other things, level 1, level 2, level 3, you know, the mold sunk to the bottom. There's the HVAC, there's you know, the lungs of your house. The house breathes, the interstitial spaces. I'm gonna talk about that in a sec. Mold is like a factory. We've heard that before, right? So all these things are repeated even when they come from different sources because these are good, reliable sources. So yeah, and yeah. This also We Inspect and Mold Finders, hashtag Mold Finders. Brian Carr hosts Mold Finders Radio, which is a podcast. And it's great because it's like, let's say you want to figure out your crawl space. Well, listen to their 20-minute episode about crawl spaces. I'll tell you, if you live in Illinois, you're not going to like it because Brian Carr's like, never have a crawl space. Like every house here has a crawl space, buddy. So, and we have tornadoes and things like that too. I mean, I'm having a basement for sure, but there's like different parts of the world and different things like that too. But their resources are amazing, and that podcast is amazing. This is another one of their resources that again I'm going to skim through. It's 18 pages long. How do you clean your stuff? So that's what a lot of people want to know. It's one thing to rip out drywall or sand floor joists or stud bays or things like that. Um, but how do you clean your stuff? Well, it's hard. It's actually hard. So in some cases, discarding the item is recommended. And one of the things they suggest in this is like, how important is it to you? And like prioritize these things. So it goes into again the protection, which I've touched on, the tools, which I've touched on, HEPA vac, microfiber towels, many, many, many of them. I like that. HEPA vac, Um, where should you do this at? You don't want to be stirring things up. Again, you can't see these things. You can't smell these things. You just have to know what particles are doing. Even on this webcam, sometimes you could see like the dust particles in my light that I see. You can't see these mold toxins. You can't see these fragments. It's not like green mold growing on the outside of a orange that you left in your backpack or something like that. It's not always the same. So HEPA-vac, whatever. I'm gonna probably skim through this one the most. But how do you clean your stuff? There's cushion porous items. That's really hard. Hard surfaces are a little bit easier, like a bed frame or a table or something like that. But prioritize these things. High monetary value, high sentimental value. The more you want to keep it, the more it's worth. Heavily consider discarding it or advise cleaning and retesting it. But again, goes through all these different things of how to clean with HEPA-vac or damp wipe or things like that. I personally, and I've heard, and I think that they might, there's arguments in the mold world, but I've heard many people say use ozone to clean your stuff, put all your stuff in a cardboard box and pump ozone into it. I think personally that ozone is a useful tool. I've had personal, like, direct success from it, but there's also a lot of controversy about that tool. I'm actually even recording this video. My computer right now is sitting on a broken ozone generator that the timer broke from it, so it went for 2 days straight. That's a concern. So all these things, again, things to consider. But jewelry, lamps, lampshades, fake houseplants, blah, 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 goes on and on. The next two, the last two, are how to clean your home more regularly. So I think that that is important. We've mostly been talking about remediation, which is pretty much like, I would say, big projects, like drywall getting removed or floor joists or stud bays, or like if you got that kind of issue, it's like, uh-oh, you got a pretty big problem, right? But what about just cleaning your house? Dust is mold food and dust harbors mold, and every home has dust levels. And a lot of these, guides I'm about to show you, it's basically like lowering the dust is our goal with these. A home breathes and mobilizes dust. For testing, post-testing best practices. Anyway, I'll move back up to here, but this is like the importance of home maintenance cleanses. I'll show you the last document is how to do a home maintenance cleanse, and it's 4 pages. This one's more like the importance of these home maintenance cleanses. So I do think that that's important to just, I don't know, share both of these. But every person's tolerance to mold is different. Meaning what is an acceptable level for you might not be acceptable level for another person. So it's important for you to seek a mold literate healthcare professional that you trust and that you resonate with. And that's the thing through my YouTube channel and my podcast, that people are able to listen to me and they're like, hey, I like what you're saying. I believe you, because I'm not like it's all or nothing. There's a million ways to do it. I'm more about like, hey, let's figure out the way for you. But everybody's sensitivity level is different. Everybody's home is different. All these action steps are different, but if you read enough and hear enough about them, they start to be really, really similar and really, really, important things to do. The age of your home dictates the age of your dust. You know, that saying scares me because my house was built in 1856. So I was gonna try to do the math on it, but I forget. But it's like really, 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 really old. You know, it's pre-Civil War. It's actually pretty clean mold-wise. I've had it tested. I've done an EMA test on it. I've did 18 samples on it with interstitial spaces between walls and air samples, and had to have some, old mold remediated and they air scrubbed and they negative pressured, and then we fogged and did a bunch of stuff afterward. And I still do these things, just regularly. But really, one of the goals with this is like just minimizing your dust. So even if you don't have mold, and you're like, we don't have mold. Well, do you want to clean your house? Like everybody cleans their house or vacuums and dusts occasionally. I would hope. But sometimes, even if we're talking about mold, people are very anti that idea. Like, well, we don't have mold. Like, I'm not saying that you're a dirty person. Do you regularly clean your house? Do people walk in from outside? Does skin, shed off? Do you have dust? Yes. Um, so yeah, a home breathes through pressurization. It circulates dust in and around the interstitial spaces. It can mobilize old dust. Your goal is really these home maintenance cleanses that focus on dust removal. So that's a big thing, even for me and my wife and I sometimes like argue about it because I'm like, hey, so this dust, not like it's only her job, but it's our job, that she mostly does. But moving out of the home during remediation, again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the home maintenance cleanse, and it's in a separate document. It's in a separate document, so that's where we're going with this next one. You can do it quarterly, you can do it every 6 months, you can do it every 12 months. That's up to you. How dirty is your house? How clean do you want it to be? And then this is the last one too, which I'll just touch on because it's in this document, but the problem with whole house fans. The house I grew up in had a whole house fan, and I don't know that there's any mold there, but what it says is that the fan caused the house to breathe harder by forcibly sucking dust out of the living space, so it can pull fungal and bacterial issues into the attic, into the insulation of the wood framing where it's maybe not air conditioned, or it's usually really hot in the summer, really cold in the winter. So they're not a fan of these whole home house fans. And how do you feel, inside and outside of your home? And to sum it up, reducing the fungal load inside your home can be done without a lot of, professional remediation or things like that. Here is how you do it. So again, 4 pages. You can use these products. They link them in here, like Benefect. Benefect is made by the same company that makes Decon 30, which is used in a fogger as well. So you could use these testing things. You could probably, I'm sure they would agree. They might have more of an opinion of better or worse, but like you could use EC3, you can use other, Decon, you can use other, products, I'm sure. But into the room and work left to right. Start with the ceiling, start from the top and work your way down because that's how the mold spores are going to fall. Use a disposable microcloth. Spray it 16 to 24 inches, wipe the surface once, and utilize the 8-way fold and wipe method. Don't re-wipe something. Don't wipe one surface and then wipe another surface. Use it once and fold it. You can wet wipe the ceiling. You can dry wipe the ceiling 2 times. So again, without reading this word for word, it gives you like actual, but like think about the degree that they're saying. Wipe the microfiber cloth around a tool like a screwdriver to get into cracks, in your molding, in the corners, on your windowsills. It might sound crazy, and I think it is. If you take, this level of cleanliness all the time, it might be crazy. But you can never be, I don't know, can you ever be too clean? Probably. But doing this once a year, twice a year, 4 times a year, or one room every quarter, one room every month, I think is a great idea. Now, I'm saying do as I say, not as I do. It's not something that we have necessarily done. But even as I've been preparing for this video, I've even, texted my wife and gotten some personal protective equipment and scheduled some days. We're going to do a day at the office here. We're going to do a day at home. And we're going to just dive into this all day and try to bang it out in one day. But yeah, so clean the trim, the moldings, they tend to be heavily soiled. They tend to need extra attention. So using these things, here's all the instructions. Under the appliances, move your appliances away if you want to. All these things are good advice. Um, on top of and inside any cabinets, use these sprays or use these, I don't know, EC3 wipes to me would be equivalent. I'm not again an indoor environmental professional, but to me it would be equivalent. You could do WeatherTech, sink mats. I got WeatherTech in my truck and things like that. Um, so yeah, all these things are just great advice. Then all furniture, HEPA-vac all soft furniture. Use cracked and crevice tools. Wait 15 minutes before you move on to the next step. Spray things. Finishing with all flooring surfaces as the things have dropped down to the floor. HEPA-vac all flooring surfaces. Use a mop. Wipe this crap up. Use a filtration system with any of these things. HEPA vacuum. Um, the vacuum is designed, the vacuum is a 4-gallon capacity. Vacuum is lightweight. I think that they recommend this vacuum. I don't think it's the one that I have. I know that my remediation or testing guy, I should say, that we use here in Central Illinois, I have the HEPA-vac that he recommends. But again, I always say Ford says they're better than Chevy, says they're better than Toyota. They're all about the same. So as long as you're getting a high quality thing, same thing with air purifiers and et cetera, as long as you're getting a high quality device, everybody claims to be better than everybody else and people have their favorites. Um, Clean the HVAC ducts. That's going to be a little more pricey. Clean the HVAC coil is, I had somebody one time and he was like, is it crazy that I feel like I slept better the day after my HVAC coil was cleaned when it had high levels of mold? I was like, no, that's not crazy. Um, yeah. That person also too was doing great for many months, 6 or 8 months. Hadn't heard from him. He went on vacation to Florida, had a flare. And I'm like, what'd you stay in? And I think he's thinking the same thing too. But the cleanup at his house, he's been doing great. Goes and stays somewhere presumably moldy, or yeah, presumably is the right word, I guess. And flares. So I think it's just interesting. Crawl space, basement, all those things. Have plumber snake French drains, look at your gutters. If a mold testing person comes out, they should be looking at gutters. They should be looking at windows. I mean, how could water get into your house? That's one of the ways: clogged gutters, bad windows, etc. So that's the end. That's a lot of stuff, you guys. And I didn't read most of it, right? I did not read the majority of it, but we send those to you. And again, I'm trying, literally trying to get through it as fast as possible. For you, don't. you know, Take some time and read those things. It literally might be an hour. Or let's say you take a week to understand this from a professional level, understand people that say that it does matter. Maybe listen to people that say that it doesn't matter. Like everything, the people that say it doesn't matter are, are wrong. The people that say it does matter are people that work with the people that these people have let down. So the more that people are saying that it matters, the more they've probably been not their first person they called, not their second person they're called, but probably, the final stop. But there's a ton of opinions. How seriously do you have to take it? I don't know that every project requires hazmat suits and things like that. If you're gonna dust your house, I don't know that you need to be, astronaut suited up. But is it hard or is there anything wrong with that? Absolutely not. So I think that some of these things, they're not that hard to take the action steps. They're not that expensive either. So why wouldn't you take more conservative approach than less conservative approach, or is conservative the right word? I don't know. More of a liberal approach, I guess, is like do it all, do it all because it's not that hard, but you can't be too safe with these things. So this is just, again, to wrap up, kind of my plea to people, whether you're my client, whether you're somebody that found me on Instagram or YouTube or whatever else, whether you're somebody who's just looking for good mold remediation advice and kind of starting from stage one, you just can't be too safe. And when done well, especially, this is the last thing I'll say, I guess, in the mold practitioner world, we all kind of say the same things and we see great success, and the prognosis is really great. So it's very fulfilling to help people find these problems and help them get well. The question is, what does it take? And if a little dusting and an air purifier doesn't get you well, then what are the next steps? And that's my point of like, instead of trying step one, step two, step three, or trying to do it super easy, you might as well just take this really seriously, clean up the environment, and let the bucket stop filling, because it's not just mold. And you don't always need a wrecking ball or a second mortgage. We just want to breathe clean air. Again, last thing I'll say for real. I had this person one time. Her husband's a dentist, and he's sharp. I like him. He's sharp. He's a cool guy. I know him. But she was like, my husband doesn't really believe in this. And I was like, believe in what? Believe in breathing clean air? Like we weren't, actually she had her house mold tested twice and nothing was showing up. And I was like, maybe it's not mold. But what about breathing clean air? Like your husband doesn't believe in that? Tell me more about that, because I'm intrigued by that belief system. We all believe in breathing clean air. So how can you make your air cleaner? Well, there's a lot of things that we talked about today that you probably weren't familiar with, and a lot of action steps and a lot of strategies. A lot of them are like under $50 or $100. The professional stuff is more expensive. The HEPA, the air scrubber, the air purifier are all, more pricey. Fogger. But all those things are useful tools. So hopefully that helps somebody either get well or prevent getting sick. Even again in my family, and I will stop talking, I promise, but in my family, nobody's sick. But I don't want my kids to ever be sick. So yeah, I would like to dust my house and I'll keep running air purifiers and all the things. It's not hard, but my office is filled with sick kids who didn't know there was a problem. And it's a lot harder to crawl out of that hole once you've fallen into it than it is to just try to not fall into it in the first place. So hope that was helpful.